Hey there, Tanya Taylor here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you three books that you can be reading right now to change your financial future. I chose these three books because the first book really allows you to think differently, second book allows you to act differently, and the third book allows you to live differently. And in all my readings for all these years, I have actually revisited these books multiple times. Right now, I'm actually reading the first one that I'm going to talk about because I recently decided to start my own business, and I felt like there was so much that I got out of this book that I want to share. I want to reread it and take some of those principles again. So if you like the contents that I'm sharing, please subscribe to my channel and share it. And I would like to hear from you as well. What books are you reading that have changed your financial future? So the three books I'm going to be talking about is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and William Danko. Now, Think and Grow Rich, this book was written in 1937, but so many of the principles are still applicable today. The book was divided into 13 principles, and he talked about how an individual should master all 13 principles. Now, I'm not going to go through each of the principles, but I am going to talk about some of the things that really resonated with me and that I have used in my life for many years, and now revisiting because I feel like they can still be used right now. And it's so important actually for me to be using them right now. So he talks about having that desire and not just a wish, because only when someone truly wants something that they act on it. And so the person must take care to create a clear and concise statement about what exactly it is that they want and the time frame that they want to achieve it in. And then you must revisit the plan almost daily so that it becomes embedded in your mind. You can visualize it, you can see it, you can recite it basically. So how would that work in real life? Let's say you wanted to make $1 million in your business by 2021. You would actually write down, I want to make $1 million in my business in 2021, March 2021, and this is how I intend to achieve it. And then based on that, if you keep rereading it, going over it again, sort of affirming it, and as he puts it, visualizing it and having faith that you're going to achieve it. So you're doing all the things, you're acting on it, you're revisiting it, you're visualizing it. So eventually it has to happen. And he talks about that in the context of your imagination and how your imagination is so powerful that you can create anything that you want. And so if you were to follow these steps, and of course it's the 13 of them, then you would be able to achieve it. One of the other things that I thought was so interesting that he talked about was having a niche, or what we call a niche today, which is like a specialization, a specialized knowledge. But he flips it on its head, because nowadays someone will say to you, if you're going to start a business, you should know what your niche is and you should start the business based on that niche. His idea was that you should know what you want to develop the specialized knowledge in, and then you go out and get that knowledge. So that doesn't exclude anyone. So anyone today who decides, you know what, I want to start a business, I want to start a business doing X, then they can actually go out and acquire that knowledge and then start the business, as opposed to being the reverse where, well, you need to have the specialized knowledge in order to start the business. So I thought that was really, really powerful, and of course, very relevant today. And the other things that really stood out to me was where he talked about you need to be a decision maker, you need to be organized, and you need to be persistent. So really great book. If you can't read it, I would say go out and get an audiobook and listen to it. It's really powerful. I would love to hear from any of you who have read this book and how it has changed your lives, or if it's something that you would go out and read. The next book I'm going to talk about is Rich Dad Poor Dad. So this is the book that I read probably in 97 when it first came out. I was fascinated by this guy. Like, he talked about how he had one dad, which is his poor dad, and his poor dad is a typical dad. He was educated. He had a okay job. He had a good job. He talked about sick days. He talked about pension. He talked about a good education will get you where you need to go. He talked about paying your bills so that you don't owe anyone. And that sounds very much like the typical family. Then his friend Mike had his dad, who was more entrepreneurial minded. So his dad thought more about things like, how do I make money work for me as opposed to working for someone else? And he gave an example of how him and Mike had worked for this dad, and the dad intentionally paid them very little. and they got upset. And the lesson that he wanted them to learn from that is that they should not work for people, but they should work for themselves, because if they work for people, they're never going to get what they're worth. And that's like, that was so powerful. And then he also talked about how most rich people, they're going to make their money work for them. So they have what's called an asset, which is what makes you money. Whereas poor people have liabilities, which is what takes money from them. And then the middle class, they usually buy liabilities, which they believe are assets. So the rich gets richer and the poor and middle class essentially gets poorer. And then he talks about how like the tax system is set up where, you guys have heard this before, that Warren Buffett pays less taxes than his secretary. And part of that is because they're able to structure their businesses in such a way that all the expenses are taken out before they pay taxes. Whereas for us who just work for an employer, we work and we have to pay taxes, a certain amount of taxes, and that's just mandatory. So he talks about using the taxes and that corporation in order to build your wealth, and how financial literacy is super, super important. So like one of the things he said is like, it is one of his 6 principles is that the rich invents money, which basically they do because they find creative ways to continue to build wealth. I followed Robert since I began my investing journey. I still try to follow him now because I just think that he just had such brilliant ideas, and the ways to achieve them were pretty attainable if you think about them and try to put some of those in practice. And then the last book, Millionaire Next Door, like this book I love because it's so simple. It talks very much about how millionaires live very simple lives, and they don't always earn a high income, but that many people who earn high income that we would think are millionaires are not. And if they run into a financial issue, like most times, like they really struggle because they buy a lot of things sort of like to keep up with the Joneses or having the social status, and so they're not able to maintain the money that they earn. But the millionaire next door, like most of them are self-employed. They were not handed money down from their parents or any other family members, and that they really believe in financial independence and not social status. A lot of them live in simple homes. They drive simple cars. But one of the things that he talked about was a lot of them choose professions where they are business owners, but it's not always a fancy business owner. It could be something very simple as being a car mechanic, um, auto shop owner, or being an accountant. I'm an accountant. So he talked about that a lot, like the different career that people choose and how they just live very simply to achieve the lifestyle that they do when they retire well. And so the whole idea of being able to think differently, act differently, and live differently in these 3 books I thought was really great. And so I actually just recently listened to The Millionaires Next Door again, because I didn't have the time to read it. And Rich Dad Poor Dad, I just handed off to my 18-year-old nephew for him to start reading because he's very interested in learning more about building wealth and all of that kind of stuff. So again, if you found this interesting, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what other books you would recommend to add to this list. And I would also love for you to share this and subscribe.